is the 200 level. Mike Carpenter live in the basement studio on a cold and dreary and cloudy Wednesday, 2 weeks away from, well, let me make sure I get my dates right here. New Year's Day, which is normally when the Citrus Bowl is played, but not this year. New Year's Eve, so I guess we're 13 days away from that. Can you believe it? When I'm going to be in Orlando, and hopefully it is not 36 degrees, cloudy, cold, and dreary. I doubt it will be. Long-term forecast is something in the mid-70s, thereabouts. And I'm excited, though it's funny how after a football season ends, you're a couple weeks removed from the last regular season game, and there's this weird, not detachment, but the sense that it ended a lot longer ago than just 2 weeks. So Illinois Northwestern, that was the last day of November, November 30th. So I guess we're talking 17 days later. 2.5 weeks feels like 2.5 months. We've turned our focus to basketball, understandably. But the thing is, Illinois football, after a 9-3 season, is very worthy of being talked about. And I wanted to spend today's podcast refocusing back on them ahead of Bragging Rights Sunday, which I'll be there in St. Louis for it, come back and do a podcast Monday. If they win. If they lose, I got to be honest, right before Christmas, do we really want to talk about that? I think Illinois will win that game. I think they kind of need to. But I wanted to talk about football because there's a few things worth talking about, specifically Luke Altmyer coming back to this team. And I got a listener mailbag that we'll open up later. We will talk about the Citrus Bowl and really how we can compare and contrast our feeling going into this to the ReliaQuest Bowl 2 years ago, because I think it's very different, the mindset going into it. And we might even look ahead to the 2025 schedule, which of course is way too early. And of course, to try to break it down in terms of win-losses it's a futile endeavor, just as it was before this season when I looked at it and thought 6-6, and they finished 9-3. So always kind of silly, but always kind of fun to look ahead. But let's start with the headline, and this will remain the headline of the entire offseason, no matter who they add, no matter what the portal additions are, no matter the retention of the guys already on the team. Luke Altmyer announcing that he's coming back. Now, at the game on Saturday, Illinois-Tennessee, first media timeout is usually my go get a drink, go to the bathroom. And I always time it out. I'm like, okay, next dead ball, and I sprint out there, I beat the crowd. So I get back just in time for the action to start again after that first media timeout, and Kara says to me, hey, did you see Luke? And I was like, Luke Altmyer? She was like, yeah, well, he announced he's coming back. I said, no kidding. Now, that alone didn't shock me, and I don't think it shocked many Illini fans. While there was the slight anxiety that you always feel going into a transfer portal season, especially if you have good dudes that could go make money elsewhere, it did feel like, in terms of fit, Luke probably would stick with Illinois. Yet, especially looking back at the announcement itself and the way that he did it and the announcement video that was released on Twitter, and I think they played it at the State Farm Center before he walked on the court, you know, that big to-do for him coming back is actually quite appropriate. I know Jeremy Warner talked about this, that the sort of dramatic presentation of it, it was worthy, considering the fact that you were returning a really good quarterback, and that alone raises the floor immensely for next year's Illinois team. But I think what it does is, for a program that so long has been unable to sustain success, and really, if we're nailing down even more specifically, unable to string together 2 consecutive good seasons, this gives you such an opportunity to do just that. It is a rare thing for Illinois in order for it to be in that position. And Luke Altmyer, just by virtue of saying, I'm back, seems to really open the door for that to be the most distinct possibility for this program since the early 90s. Like the Makovic era was the last time you had 2 consecutive truly good seasons in a row. Now, before we get into what that means for wins and losses, and we'll talk about the 2025 schedule, of which most of it I think is promising for Illinois, but there's a few hiccups along the way. Next year's team, let's get it out there right now, does not have to go 9-3. They may not even have to go 8-4. I mean, how greedy do we need to get? 8-4, I would still be over the moon. For a consecutive 9 and an 8-win season, maybe 10 if they beat South Carolina, who knows? But really, you make a bowl next year, and that alone is stemming the tide. It's going against what we are so used to as Illini football fans that I'd say, okay, that's a success. Yeah, 6-6 would not be the most exciting. but it would sure beat 5-7. The exciting part, though, is that might be the floor. I do think there's something to be said about potential ceiling of having a senior quarterback in his third year in the system. And what's really going to be interesting to see going forward is whether or not his return and the announcement of that return pays dividends in the transfer portal. Like, do they surround Luke with guys that will help that offense take the next step? Because while the offense was good this year, you could not have argued that they were great. Statistically in the nation, they were not great. They were good. And we saw that with our own eyes. There were moments that could be frustrating with them, but to their credit, especially against not so great defenses, they got theirs. And to the tune of 38 points in the last 3 games of the season. Yeah, I know that Michigan State and Rutgers and Northwestern are not great. You should have won all 3 of those games. But 38 points in 3 consecutive Big Ten games is a big deal for this program. And it's a major step forward, and I think that there's still room for them to take yet another step forward next year. But it all starts with Luke. And the things that he said this week that indicated his comfort with Bret Bielema and Barry Lunny seem to indicate that there is a health to this program that Illini fans should feel optimistic about in the post-Luke Altmyer era, which will come sooner rather than later. We got 1 more year with Luke, and that's it. And then you move on. If it's Trey Petty or if it's Carson Boyd or if it's a transfer, it's always a big deal when you have to move to a new quarterback. But don't you feel in this position that the program is in a better spot to handle such a massive transition? And I think they are, and I think the words that Luke said this week seem to indicate that they are. I mean, when he was asked about it, he said he didn't even really consider looking in the portal because he's happy here. And that, to me, it speaks of 2 things. One, a maturity on his part, because if you were to ask adults that have been in the workforce long enough, many of them would say, yeah, happiness does mean something. In other words, if they had the option to accept another job with a bit more money than the one they already have, they would be considering, well, wait a second, am I happy where I'm at? Like, is it really worth me taking that leap? That's something that someone in the workforce for a long time considers. Not often a 21 or maybe he's 22-year-old quarterback who certainly would have had suitors with deep pockets. So he doesn't consider that. I hope Illinois makes it worth his while. I imagine they will. But he also, in mentioning this happiness with being here, I think speaks to the kind of relationship that Bret Bielema tends to have with his players. I mean, they seem to adore this guy. And you could look at a few different factors for that. I mean, there's the sort of anecdotal stories that come out from the players themselves, but also that not a lot of guys transfer out, not a lot of key contributors. And there was something of note that, Luke Altmyer says that about him and Bret and Barry and their relationship. I believe him. And then Bret Bielema comes out and says there are 5 former players that want to come back, that had transferred out and they want to come back. And you know what? I believe him. I actually believe him there. What reason would he have to lie about that? I don't know. I mean, he's a salesman, so you never know for sure. But I believe it because it seems as if the coaching staff, and even the ones that I might have questions about, like an Aaron Henry, have very positive relationships with their players. And that seems to all start at the top and really just trickle down. So I guess this is a long-winded way of saying that Luke Altmyer's return is not just about you returning a quarterback to a team and giving them a great opportunity to have another winning season, consecutive winning seasons for the first time in God knows when. It's not just that, but that it speaks to Bret Bielema and his ability to convince these players that this is a place that they want to be. And in this NIL climate and the transfer portal era, that's not easy to do. The grass is often greener in the eyes of these younger people. I think the younger you are, you're always looking out for the next best thing to pop out, whether that be the next best person to potentially date, or if you're an athlete in this case, looking for the next school that would maybe love to have your talents as part of that team. But that does not seem to be an issue for Bret Bielema and the staff. So today we're going to focus a little bit on football. I wanted to do that because I don't know what opportunity we'll have before the Citrus Bowl to be fully honest with you. After the bragging rights game, plan on doing a podcast that next day. If they lose again, why? Probably won't. But if they win, would love to recap it with you. And then it's Christmas. And then I go to Michigan. And then I come home. And then I go to Orlando. So there's going to be a dearth of material in that holiday week and a half right there. And I'll try to maybe get some content from Orlando, but I figured that if we were to put sort of a cherry on top of this 9-3 season, probably better do it now, as we're now, 13 days away from the Citrus Bowl, Illinois versus South Carolina. What a cool opportunity, and one that I'm excited for, and really something that this team absolutely deserves. So we'll get into that now, and we got the listener mailbag as well. But before I get too far ahead of myself, got to remind you, the 200 level is brought to you by Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign. I got a meal there coming up this week. Cannot wait to get back there. It is a Christmas kind of family and friend thing that we have going on at Hamilton Walkers. But I'm going to get there nice and early to get, you guessed it, an old-fashioned at the bar. And listen, I've had my share of old-fashions in town. Some good ones at different restaurants, but there's something about theirs, which if you get the house old-fashioned, Buffalo Trace is their bourbon of choice. I'm a big fan of that bourbon. I think it mixes perfectly for it. But then after you get, feeling good and toasty from their delicious old-fashioned, bone-in steak, usually my choice. I get it medium. I'm not one of those that likes it super bloody. I like a little more char, so I get medium, steak fry side, family style, so you can share with other people. And it's just, I can't wait. I'm already basically having the Pavlovian dog response to it, salivating at the thought that I will be eating there later this week. So that's Hamilton Walkers, downtown Champaign, steak, seafood, and spirits. Also got to thank State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com. For life, auto, home, business renters, you name it, Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. We've been working with him now for a few years since we moved into our new house, and Brian has just been terrific the entire way. Great support staff as well that anytime we have a question about our insurance needs, which include auto and home, they're right there for us. Great State Farm rates as well. That's State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728, and they are able, I would imagine, to still get out there in case you need to get a furnace check before we get to the Christmas holiday. We got 1 week. That's it. And if you're having guests and you're having dinner parties and all that sort of stuff that usually happens this time of year, Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing can make sure that your HVAC system is running perfectly. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend at 217-841-4728. And finally, got to thank Owen Builders, LLC. Online at owenbuildersllc.com. Luke and his staff, expert craftsmen, great customer service. Find a gallery, of their work online at owenbuildersllc.com. And while there, get a free quote for your next home project. Got to thank Champagne Showers Podcast Network. Appreciate them and appreciate you. Got a few popping in on this somewhat unannounced. I just threw the live stream up there on YouTube, so hello to the few that are actually out there on this Wednesday afternoon. And a quick reminder, this Christmas season, it's not too late, folks. 1 week until Christmas. You can get the 200 level book locally in Champaign. You can get it either Game Day Spirit location or Jane Addams bookstore. If you were not in the Champaign-Urbana area, no problem. Amazon will still get it to you before Christmas. It's amazing, too, because the deal that I made with them, Amazon Publishing, prints this on demand. I guess just a lot of their manufacturing places have the capability to print out an Amazon book like that. So whether it's hardcover or paperback, it will still arrive before Christmas. You probably have another day or two in order to ensure that it does, but pretty cool. And I've had a great time. It's just been really easy to work with them, and it's fair to the author, and I appreciate the support. We've had a nice little push here of holiday sales, and I hope that it will make the Illini fan in your life happy as they go into their stocking and find a book about Illini basketball, of which there's not many out there. So I hope you enjoy it and appreciate the support. It was fun to write it, and now that it's basketball season, it's been fun to get the occasional comment or Twitter message about someone that has read the book and that it conjures up a memory of their own. But this podcast, my friends, is not about Illini basketball. That will be most of the rest of the year on the 200 level. Of course, we'll talk the bowl game afterwards and transfer portal, all that stuff. That will be a topic, but we will focus on Illini basketball plenty, and I think it will be a fascinating year, and hopefully for the better. I ultimately think, yes, it will be. It's a very good team that I think will coalesce. But I spent the opening segment talking about Luke Altmyer and the importance of him coming back to next year's team, and To me, I was trying to reflect on the last time I would have been this excited going into an Illini football season. Now, I was unreasonably excited going into 2023, thinking that the tail end of 2022 would actually inform last year's team to come out guns blazing. Well, that wasn't the case. And naively of me, I thought that they could withstand all the roster turnover, when in actuality they couldn't. And that mixed with a not very good first year for Aaron Henry and a few other factors led to a team that went 5-7. I mean, turnover-prone Luke Altmyer. That didn't help either. So if you were to ask me when was the last time you were this genuinely excited going into an Illinois football season, it would probably be 2008 after the Rose Bowl year, because you still had your quarterback coming back. You had Aurelius Ben coming back. Vontae Davis, I believe, would have come back for another year. Listen, the 2008 team, even though they lost Jay Lehman, Justin Harrison, Kevin Mitchell, oh boy, who else on defense? A couple other senior leaders on defense. Man, you know, they had so much talent coming back that we all thought they were just going to kind of keep trucking along. Well, we didn't factor in the Ron Zook effect, maybe to the extent that we should have. Not to turn this into a roast Ron Zook thing, but him and Bret Bielema are not in the same zip code. They aren't in the same ballpark when it comes to coaching ability. So I do take something to the bank here, which is I have more faith in Bret Bielema in a year returning with a good quarterback to sustain that momentum than I should have with Ron Zook back in 2008, let alone 2009. But 2008 was probably the last time I would have been that excited going into a season. And you could say, well, other than the quarterback, why? And that would be a fair question, losing a Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin. And how are we just going to replicate what they did with other wide receivers? Even if you go get a guy in the portal, who's going to be your Pat Bryant? Well, I don't know if you're going to have your Pat Bryant. But guess what? This team didn't have their Johnny Newton, and they overcame it. I think what heartens me going into the bowl game and then going into next season, the quarterback alleviates many fears of a total drop-off. I mean, that's what a quarterback position can do when you feel good about it. To me, it's really the fact that most every other piece, or so it sounds, is coming back. And you did build some depth throughout the year. And you saw contributions from this redshirt sophomore and that redshirt sophomore. And as the season wore on, when depth had become an issue for Illinois in the past, what really was exciting this year, especially in that last three-game stretch, was seeing the emergence of even a guy like a Malachi Hood. I know that name was thrown out there a lot for what he did defensively and the athleticism that he showed at linebacker. But that is a pretty good example of how you had depth start to emerge in a way that you didn't in 2023 and you didn't in 2022. So across the board, you feel as if, okay, now we're entering year 5 of Bret Bielema, and he's had a lot of his guys here for a long time, not many of whom have decided, you know what, I'm seeking greener pastures. Instead, most have said, I want to develop under this coaching staff. And they've stuck it out, and some will get their opportunities next year, but most of your starters will be coming back as well. You had, I think, fewer seniors than any Big Ten team, and there are some crazy stats as to how sophomore and junior-laden this year's team was, and they went 9-3. So, of course, there's key positions that they need to address, and I have no doubt that they will in some way, shape, or form. But for the most part, the returnees that are coming back and the experience coming back, along with a schedule that, I don't know, seems doable, that says to me that, yes, we have actual legitimate reasons to be excited. But you know what also is something that I've learned, and it took me 38 years to do this, so, better late than never. I'm not going to go into next year saying 10-2, 9-3. To me, it's going to be kind of a wide range of outcomes that I could potentially be happy with. I will take a bowl game, of course, and I think they should make a bowl game, even if there is some adverse YouTube. Get back here. All right. I know that's excellent podcasting. Unfortunate timing for a call. No, there are any number of results next year that would still have me feeling good at the end of it. And I think that all of those are on the table just by sheer virtue that you have a quarterback and all these returnees coming back, And it seems like you'll have continuity on the coaching staff. And while I do have concerns about an Aaron Henry, and I don't feel comfortable thinking, the defense is going to be even better next year, even though they are returning a lot. And there's a good chance they will be better. Like, even with that uncertainty, I'm thinking, wait a second. Go across the Big Ten. Go across similar schools, and I would imagine they have far deeper concerns than Illinois will going into next year. Making this all the more exciting in my mind is that we are still, as a fan base, reasonable about our expectations for this team. Of course we'll be excited going into next year because we got our quarterback and we got a lot of returning guys. Of course we will. Of course, Lot 31 will be bumping, and all the other lots from the first game against, I think, Western Illinois all the way until the last weekend of the year against Northwestern. Maybe we'll even have a good crowd for that Thanksgiving weekend. Who knows? Maybe we'll be playing for something important that weekend. It's not outside the realm of possibility, which is pretty exciting to say that's where you're at. But to me, all of that stuff, like, Big Ten titles or, college football playoff appearances, I'm still not going to go into next year really talking about those as possibilities. As a fan, I still don't need that. Maybe this is just me talking to someone that has watched Illinois football flounder for most of my life, and that a 9-3 record and a trip to the Citrus Bowl has me over the moon. I mean, I said this before this season. 7-5 would have had me over the moon. They went 9-3. No Duke's Mayo Bowl, no Pinstripe Bowl. They're going to Orlando for the Citrus. It's a huge deal, and one that, if I were to say this, I hope it makes sense, takes a little bit of pressure off. They don't need to make the Citrus next year. They wouldn't have you anyway. They don't need to go back to Tampa. They could go 7-5 or, 8-4, amazing, and make the Music City Bowl. And I think I'm happy, because that would just suggest that you are getting to that level of an Iowa or Wisconsin where, even when things don't go according to plan or they don't go perfectly, you still could get a 7-win season. That's what it would say to me. And I think that is right there for this team going into 2025. Now, I asked 2 questions in the listener mailbag, and I want to address the second one first before I get to what you guys responded with. But I asked, Luke Altmyer coming back, how does that inform your feelings for the 2025 season? Got those responses coming up. And then the second question I asked is, hey, in general, how are you feeling about the 2025 Citrus Bowl? And I didn't really elaborate on what I meant by that, but I'll tell you what I was thinking. Every bowl experience and the way that we kind of perceive them is different. So 2 years ago, when we went to Tampa for the ReliaQuest Bowl, formerly the Outback Bowl, one of my favorites, in my mind, it was somewhat important to win that game. Mississippi State, totally beatable opponent. Then Mike Leach dies, and you think, oh, great. Of course you feel bad for him, but you also know the narrative that's going to be going on as you go into that game. And then Chase Brown opts out. Sidney Brown opts out. Devin Witherspoon opts out. Fortunately, that was it, but those are 3 big pieces, and you probably win that game with them. But I remember waking up in that Tampa hotel thinking, I'd really like to win this game, because 9-4 feels a hell of a lot better than 8-5. Go to the game, you're leading for most of it. Late touchdown for Mississippi State. I think it was a shoestring catch in the back of the end zone. I mean, well defended and everything. Defense was actually pretty good in that game. And then you're just unable to score and take the lead. And you had opportunities, but you just could not connect on longer passes. It was not one of Tommy DeVito's better games. And your wide receiving core just wasn't quite where you would have wanted it to be either. So you lose, and you go 8-5, and then you think we've lost 4 of the last 5 games, most of them in heartbreaking fashion, and the wind kind of fell out of the sails. And what could have been a great year ended, let's be honest, with a thud. Now, that team was unable to withstand the lack of depth, and they didn't really help themselves out all that much either with some uncharacteristic mistakes, especially in the Michigan State and Purdue home games. Michigan game, that doesn't really bother me. Mississippi State game, that doesn't really bother me. It was the 2 that came before Michigan that really set the end of that season on a not-so-great track and ended it disappointingly. And Tampa, while I had a great time at the bowl game, and Kara did too, and I thought, I'll go to bowl games in the future if it works out. Like, it was still fun. It was a really cool experience, and it was a great city, and I'd do it again. But it left you wanting. because 8-5 after starting 7-1, that's not great. I mean, you can see it in a media guide, you can see it on the Wikipedia page for that season, and you're like, wow, what happened there? What happened there? Well, we lived it, so we remember what happened. And you know how close you were to maybe a 10-win season. I mean, it was right there for you, but you didn't. So there's something so drastically different in my mind. One, you already have the 9th win. So we're going into this worst case 9-4 afterwards. Two, you haven't lost 3 of your last 4 games. You've won three games in a row. One of them in absolutely thrilling fashion. So you got a signature moment on the road against Rutgers, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. You get a highlight reel thing that will be on Illini football clips for a long time, as it should be. I mean, it was amazing. So you had a final quarter of the season that was actually fun. You're scoring 38 points per game in the Big Ten. 38, 38, 38. No problem, right? That's how good the offense was late. And so that's certainly different than 2 years ago when you felt like you were starting to just sort of plateau and then actually slightly digress a little bit. Regress, excuse me. And then one other thing that I thought of with this year too. So, you already got the 9th win. You've won the last 3 games. Because of Luke coming back, I also think that has an impact on how I view this game. The Citrus Bowl is a bonus. It's not going to do a whole lot to affect the way that we viewed this season. Whereas 2 years ago, winning that ReliaQuest Bowl in what was the first bowl game for Illinois since the Red Box Bowl, but really the first meaningful bowl game in a long time, that would have meant a lot more to that season and how we perceived it than this game will matter to the 2024 regular season. I don't think that we're going to look back at, let's say, a 10-point, 13-point loss to South Carolina, which is a distinct possibility with as good as they are, and think, you know what, that 2024 team, it was fine. No, we're still going to say that was a really fun season. I think I've addressed this before. And I'm going to do it again just to kind of frame this season why it's so different from 2 years ago. 7-1 in 2022 was awesome, and we felt that groundswell of excitement leading to a damn near sellout against Michigan State. And then air out of the balloon. What made this season so satisfying was you had an entire season's worth of excitement. You won your first 3 games at home, 3-0. You win the big game at Nebraska, and then you lose at Penn State. Okay, 4-1. You went overtime against Purdue. Phew. And then Michigan at home in the 100th anniversary. Bowl eligible, 6-1, midway through October. The only time this year where it felt like that air was coming out of the balloon was you lose to Oregon, fine, even though they kicked your butt and that didn't feel good. And then you lose at home kind of flat to Minnesota, and you have a bye week. So by the time you get to Michigan State, it had been damn near a month since you had won a football game. If there was a moment this season where it felt like, it was going into that Michigan State game. But what do? They respond. And then win 38-16. And we knew in the back of our minds, I know Michigan State's not great, but they weren't great 2 years ago. So how is this going to go? And just by winning that, boy, what a difference. Walking back out to that tailgate lot and you're 7-3, you realize that we probably aren't going to have the same end-of-season thud as 2 years ago. And sure enough, they didn't. Yeah, by the skin of their teeth at Rutgers. But we're talking about 12 weeks, and really 14 if you include the bye. 14-week stretch where for the majority of that, you felt good about your football team. And that's what separated it so much from 2022. And really, if you think about it, most Illini seasons that have went to a bowl game have some crazy streak somewhere in the middle of them. In the middle or the beginning or the end of them. There's a streak that propels them to the bowl game. But if you look outside of that streak, there were some not so good football mixed in the batch. Take Lovey's bowl team. They were 2-4. They stunk. And then they won 4 games in a row, right? I believe that's correct. It was Wisconsin, Purdue, Michigan State, and Rutgers. Wisconsin, Purdue, Rutgers at home, and then at Michigan State to get bowl eligible. So they won 4 games in a row before losing their last 2, including Northwestern against a third-string quarterback, and then losing the bowl game 6-7. Boom. So what was that? Was that a bowl team, or was that a not-so-good team that had a 4-game win streak in the middle of the season? Probably the latter. No, this from the outset was a good team. And I will not use the word great because I don't think they're great. But you know what? They finished number 20 in the college football playoff rankings. And given their schedule, that is a valid ranking. 20th. And for me and everything I've ever talked about with Illini football and what I would like them to be, that's great. Any borderline top 25 Illinois football team is going to make me a happy guy. And I'm sure if that continues year in, year out, and Bret Bielema makes that the norm, then we will get greedy. And that's okay. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But that is all of those factors I just noted are why this bowl appearance feels different. So I went to the listener mailbag, and I want to pull this up here. And it is a two-pronged question, one about how you view the 2025 season ahead with Luke on board, and then a follow-up question about how you overall feel going into the Citrus Bowl. So let me just make sure I get all these responses queued up here. Okay, so this is from Rex. Well, with a monster Heisman-type campaign, he could get close to breaking the school records for passing yards and TDs. He would need something like 3,800 yards and 30 touchdowns next year. I don't, Rex, foresee that, and I don't think you need that. But I do think if you go back to Jeremy and Joey's last podcast on Illini Inquirer, they talk about if he basically just replicates what he did this year, and I have no reason to doubt that he would do that, then he is top 5 in most every quarterback record at Illinois. And here's the thing. There's been some good quarterbacks here. I'm not going to call us quarterback you, but Tony Eason, Jack Trudeau, Kurt Kittner, Nathan Shieldhouse had good numbers. Am I forgetting one? I mean, Juice was a talent. He's not on many of those quarterbacking records, except probably quarterbacking rushing yards, certainly at the top. But you've had some good quarterbacks over the years. Can I throw Johnny Johnson out there? I mean, he's not in the record books, really, compared to the other guys. Jason Verduzco had some good years. Oh, geez, I was just about to forget. Jeff George, not bad, right? So there have been good quarterbacks here, and he would be in the top 5 of most every meaningful category. All right, from the Tomahawk. 1, as far as Luke is concerned, it seems like there are at least 8 wins available next year. And then he goes on to say, for the second question about the Citrus Bowl, what's the opt-out/transfer situation for South Carolina? Seems like a game both teams are taking fairly seriously, so hopefully a fun watch for us. Well, first thing here, Tomahawk says about 8 or more wins next year, and we're going to look at the schedule in a bit, but it's not outside the realm of possibility, Tomahawk, just looking at the schedule at a glance. And then they ask about the opt-out transfer situation for South Carolina, and to my knowledge right now, no one has opted out. They have, I think, the SEC Defensive Player of the Year, Kyle Kennard. He is not officially opted out. So they might be full strength. Bret Bielema has said that other than Pat Bryant, he expects everybody to be there. Now I'm wondering, are we starting to see the pendulum swing back in bowl games and players are saying, screw it, I'm going to play? Did Pat make his decision too early? I'm not going to begrudge him. I'm not. Would it be fun to have him out there? Yeah. Can you still get some production from your other receivers? I think so. And that doesn't hurt for next year either. I mean, why not? Here's the perfect scenario for the receiving position in this game. Zakari's going to play, and he's going to get his, and he'll be the alpha guy on that roster. But Alex Kapka-Jones, Colin Dixon, Hank Beatty, Malik Elsie, hopefully healthy after all this time. All right, guys, your table is set. Luke Altmyer said something to that effect a couple days ago, that it's their opportunity to make something. All right, here's what we got from Evan W. First about Luke. With Luke staying, I think that stabilizes a bowl appearance at least, and that we won't bounce back to that 5-7 disappointment. As of now, my expectation is a 7-8 win season, but can elevate to another 9 or even 10, depending on what happens in the portal. Need another Franklin-like get in the portal and some more quality line play. 2, in terms of the Citrus Bowl, I feel good ahead of it. Not necessarily expecting a win, but just want to see a good game. It's more of a celebration to me than anything. But I think of all the SEC teams that were to qualify for this game, they will be the one that will give us the biggest challenge because it's just as meaningful to them. Evan, I agree with that, and this is why the South Carolina thing, yes, I would have preferred Alabama and a myriad of opt-outs and them not caring as much. I would have preferred that. I am starting to come around on the idea, like Tomahawk said in the last post. Both of these teams are taking it serious. So I do think that will lead to an inspired game. I just hope that they don't outclass us at just one too many positions, and then that leads to, if not a blowout, hopefully it's not that, like a 17, 20-point win. it's a distinct possibility if the SEC is as good and athletic as I think they still are. And I love this Illinois team, but I also recognize some of their limitations. So, Evan, I'm with you. I think it is the toughest between Ole Miss and Alabama and South Carolina. And it's also the least sexy name, which is a bummer because you don't get these opportunities to play the likes of an Alabama hardly ever. So it seemed like it was right there, and it didn't happen. Regardless, I agree, though, Evan, that this bowl game feels more celebratory. 2 years ago, felt like, all right, let's go get it done. This year's more celebratory from a fan perspective. I would be interested to see, though, at practices, assuming that almost everybody on the bowl game roster is coming back next year, how serious they're taking it for Illinois. And I would imagine that in their mind, it's we're going to go win this damn game. I mean, they're athletes, they're competitors. Of course, that'd be their mindset. But I do think that they are not going to go into this game thinking, boy, we're going to have to be perfect in order to beat South Carolina. I don't think they have to be perfect to beat South Carolina. Weird things happen in bowl games, and I'm going to kind of hang my hat on the fact that, 5 weeks removed from your previous game, not that you're hitting complete reset buttons for both teams, but whatever momentum you would want to ascribe to South Carolina winning 6 in a row is not as much as you would if they were just a week removed from their last game. You're going to be over a month removed from it. From Jeff, I think the goal is consistency. This is in terms of Luke coming back, and achieving 8+ wins is obviously the goal, but I don't think there is a sure thing or the floor for the program. There are serious holes to fill, and the coaching staff needs to come through in the transfer portal. I was at a Missouri Bowl game against South Carolina, and they travel well and are rowdy fans. I expect this to be a nail-biter since they don't have PB. I would love for it to be a nail-biter, Jeff. I would love to be in the stands and in the fourth quarter be a little bit nervous because it's a one-score game, and maybe, listen, give Luke the ball with a chance to win the game. That, to me, dream scenario right there. Actually, dream scenario is you win by 3 scores. That's not going to happen, though. South Carolina's good. It will take every bit of you, but if you put forth a Penn State effort and actually finish drives, yeah, why not? From C. Vance, first question in regards to Luke. Would have been shocked if Luke moved on. On paper, he's a top 3 returning quarterback in the Big Ten. He raises the floor to 6 minimum, but more like 7 or 8 wins. Second point about the Citrus Bowl. It will be a good game, but Illinois has never beaten an SEC team. So until they do, I can't pick a win. It's funny, C. Vance. I mean, I'm going down there not with the mindset that Illinois is going to win. I don't expect them to. But I don't mean that in some sort of, fatalistic way. It's just the reality of where South Carolina finished the year and where Illinois, despite winning 3 in a row, finished the year. The quality wins that South Carolina has would lead you to believe that they are a legit top 15 team. I believe they're ranked 16, but they seem much more top 15, and we seem like top 25. Now, it's doable. It just so happens that they have enough elite dudes at their quarterback position. I know he's young, but the dude is an athletic freak. I worry what could happen as a result with our defense against an athletic quarterback. It bothered us sometimes this year, but maybe we pulled the Jalen Daniels thing and we kind of keep the guy in front of us and force him to go on long drives, and we basically do the Kansas playbook. The thing is, South Carolina's defense, much better than Kansas's defense. A very, very good defense nationally. This is from K. Andrew. 1, about Luke. In my 2-year mantra of just get me 6 and establish bowl minimum culture, I feel like we just locked up our 2nd consecutive bowl season next year. Don't count chickens, just how it feels. And 2, for the bowl game, K. Andrew says, please stay freaking healthy in the Citrus. Here, K. Andrew. Super important, of course. All right, this is from Ethan. Ethan S. Get a strong line and depth built up front of Luke in the running game. I could see a playoff berth with the schedule we got. Okay. I'm not going to say you're crazy to say that. I mean, they finished 20th this year, and there were holes on this Illini roster. They had significant areas of, if not weakness, just bleh. Neither line was dominant. Linebacking play was suspect. Secondary was good. Receivers were good. Running back room had injuries, so it was by committee. Quarterback was good, and special teams were good. So there was more good than anything, but at the same time, to be 20th in the college football playoff ranking with this team would lead me to believe that there will be better teams at Illinois under Bret Bielema, and next year's team might, on paper, be better. From Timbo 1, everything depends on the portal, both coming and going. And why did Casey Washington leave and come back? I think Timbo is making the point of these 5 transfers that Bret Bielema says would want to come back. Think about it. Casey Washington was one of the first to do that 2 years ago, and it worked out pretty well for Illinois. Now, I want to do an exercise here, as silly as it might be. But last thing here before we wrap up this podcast is looking ahead of the 2025 season and the schedule there and trying to figure out, okay, how many wins might be on the board for this? Now, this came out last week, and dates and everything included, of course, subject to change with the potential Thursday or Friday night game. But you begin with Western Illinois at home on August 30th. Win. Okay, no offense to Western Illinois, but win. This is my first complaint of the schedule. At Duke. Why? Now, you remember me hammering home repeatedly how we should buy out of the Kansas game. I think we should buy out of the Duke game. I actually think Duke will be fine to do that. We saw this year with the college football playoff and how an SMU can get in there, how an Indiana can get in there. You have no benefit in playing tough out-of-conference opponents. So don't. Play 3 scrubs at home, buy those wins, and then play your conference schedule. It's not too late for Josh Whitman to do that. I hope they consider it. I think Duke, again, would be just fine with staying home and home against Illinois. We don't need it. And I would still say the same thing for Missouri. You got a gauntlet in the Big Ten, even with a favorable schedule like this. And you see with Indiana, if you just win a crap ton of games, you got a shot. So no Duke. And it's not a game that I like because they got the Tulane quarterback, who a really young stud that can run the ball. They seem to have the ability to score. I just don't like, I mean, if this were at home, I'd be less concerned. It's not. Buy out of it. Get out of the series. Western Michigan at home after that, they struggled this year. Okay, so let's say 2-1. At Indiana in Game 4. Who's to say? I don't know if Curtis Rourke is a senior. I imagine he is. And that they have actually quite a few older guys that came over and led to their 11-1 season. And I am, by the way, super excited for that Indiana-Notre Dame game. I think that's going to be an awesome game. I think Indiana will hang. But let's just say for the sake of argument, 2-2, and I think that's fair. Now, if you're somehow 3-1, and I think out of those 2, a win at Duke might be more likely, then 3-1, you're feeling fantastic. 4-0 is okay. Now we start talking playoff as Southern California comes into town on September 27th. Now, if this were at Southern California, USC, then I would be more concerned. But being at home and them having to travel across the country and just the weird state that program is in under Lincoln Riley, I feel good about that game. I objectively, right here, right now, just looking at it. So, yeah, I think that's actually more than likely a win. I know they have talent. They're a mess. That program's a mess right now. And I think it will get worse before it gets better for Lincoln Riley. At Purdue, okay. Just, it shouldn't have to go to overtime. Barry Odom might turn out to be an okay pick for them, but boy, you talk about a complete rebuild at Purdue. Right there, I think you're looking at 4-2. I think 4-2 in the first 6 is totally reasonable, and that factors in a couple of losses that may be against a not as tough as you think Duke or not as tough as you think Indiana. But let's say 4-2 halfway point, okay? Next week, you get Ohio State at home. Now, it's still Ohio State. And if it's not Michigan, they will beat any other Big Ten team. I would not go into that game expecting a win, and I think for way too early predictions, it's fair to say loss, and that would leave you at 4-3 going into Washington. Now, we don't know where Washington's going to be either, and that's after a bye week for Illinois, so that's a good bit of scheduling there. But cross-country trips, never like that. Washington, tough place to play. It's just hard to tell with Washington's coach, who had been at Arizona last year. I forget his name right now, but not a super smooth first season for him at Washington. And we'll see if another year removed from the national title, if they take another step back. But all that said, I still would predict a loss in that game, which would put you at 4-4. But this, my friends, is where it gets fun. Rutgers at home. Come on. Win. Maryland at home. Come on. Win. At Wisconsin. Tough. But I think that the Luke Fickell era is just kind of a muddled mess. And you know, Bret Bielema has not forgotten that game last year. Not forgotten the 2-point conversion with the offensive lineman who changed jerseys. That'll be an early game that Bret Bielema has probably already got circled on that schedule. Let me rephrase that. I know it's later in the season, but Bret Bielema is going to have that one circled early because it means a lot to him. Northwestern at home. That, to me, looks like 7-5 if you are being conservative. But just given the nature of how close games were this year, you got to factor that you might not get every bounce in close games. And if that's the case, then 7-5 is a distinct possibility. But would I be overly disappointed in a result like that? No, I wouldn't be. I do think anywhere between 7 and 9 wins, though, is a fair prediction. And what a world to be in. Now, remember last year, I was gung-ho. I said 9-3. Good God. I'm an idiot. But I think other Big Ten prognosticators would look at next year's Illinois team and think, yeah, they probably will get 7 or 8 wins. So it wouldn't just be me on an island thinking, well, come on, they're wearing orange and blue, so therefore they're going to be very successful. That's the fanboy part of me that is a flaw, inherent flaw of my prognostications. But me conservatively looking at the 2025 schedule, it's why I think buy out of the Duke game. Can I write to Josh Whitman? I don't know if you'd even have to buy out of it. Again, I think Duke would be on board to say, hey, listen, the nature of college football now, there is no benefit in this series. So shake hands, we're done. Okay, great. Let's go buy a win. Just do it. There's no value in, hey, we're going to get experience on the road. You're going to get plenty of experience on the road. You got 5 Big Ten road games. Is that right? Oh, actually, no, that's wrong. You have 4. That's an advantage. You should play 8 home games next year. Whatever money you'd have to spend, even if there was a buyout and buying an opponent to come here and play, the money that's involved in that, operate like Michigan. 3 home games always, and then the Big Ten schedule starts. Michigan always has 8 home games. That's how it should be. Well, 8 or 7, depending on how many Big Ten home games you get. But it's right there for you. So, Josh, please, I know you don't listen, but if anyone does listen and has any bit of his ear, buy out of that game. It's not out of fear so much as why. Why even do it? Don't. And then that opens up the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm not going to say 7 wins. I'm going to say 8. Just like that, because there's more of a certainty in knowing that you don't need to go on the road to an ACC team. And no, it would not be the toughest environment. But I want no part of it. And I would not be looking forward to, oh, great, Duke's coming. Duke's coming in 2026. I don't want to give that game up. I don't care. They can play Joe Schmo, and it doesn't matter to me. Play a scrub. I'll go to Lot 31. I'll tailgate. I'll watch us win. Listen, I got no relationship with Duke football. So if I go in there and I see them beat Western Michigan the following week, I would not have that much more enjoyment if it had been Duke the week before. It just doesn't matter to me. So I'm sorry to rant and rave about it, but I want this program to sustain success. And an early season loss out of conference does not help them do that. So just be reasonable about this, Josh. You got the money. And I just hope they get it done because you don't need that game. It doesn't help a damn thing. All right. So here's what we did. We talked about Luke. We talked about the Citrus Bowl. We talked about next year. We talked about the way that expectations understandably change when you have a quarterback coming back as a senior. And you feel pretty good overall about the staff and the health of the program. And it's a really cool place to be as an Illini football fan where you're not a laughingstock anymore. I mean, plain and simple, you were not. And you're one that when you come up on a schedule, you're Washington. You look at the home games. Oh, Illinois, that's interesting. It's not bad. Or if you are, what are the other road games for us? At Wisconsin. Kind of a big home game for him. Illinois, oh, damn, like 9 wins last year. We went 5-7. That's tough. If you're a Badger fan, you're thinking that's tough. So it's cool to have flipped that narrative, even in that very anecdotal way, where you would have opposing fan bases think, oh, yeah, well, that'll be a tough one. Even an Ohio State fan, maybe, looking at their schedule and saying, yeah, 11-1. Well, yeah, you just want to avoid that hiccup at Illinois. I mean, even if a few Ohio State fans say that, I consider that a victory, a moral victory, I should say, if they were, in fact, to start taking you seriously. And I think they could. So All right. For the few of you on YouTube, I appreciate you joining me again, kind of unannounced, and I just threw this out there. So thank you for popping in. For the Twitter folks in the listener mailbag, appreciate your feedback as always. Got to thank our sponsors, Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign, Steak, Seafood, and Spirits. I cannot wait to get my hands on, or my fork and knife, on a bone-in steak tomorrow. Oh, that's where I'm going. Old-fashioned beforehand. Might even get a second one during the meal. It's just that damn good. Hamilton Walkers, Steak, Seafood, and Spirits in downtown Champaign. Hey, fun fact, if you go there, you can see a portrait of me behind the cashier. So from our Tay and Carp days, see the bobblehead right here on YouTube, our Tay and Carp days, me and Lon and Harry and Trevor went in there. It was the owner, Andrew Libman, who listened to the show, and he comped us a free meal as that show was coming to a close. And I've seen Andrew there a couple times since. So appreciate them and appreciate Nathan, the GM, and a great place to go for the holiday season. And I'm excited to get back there myself at Hamilton Walkers, downtown Champaign. State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com for life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. Get that furnace check scheduled. They can probably still get out there before Christmas. So if you're hosting anything and you want to make sure that your place is ready to go for whatever festivities you have and it won't turn into a refrigerator, give Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing a call today. And finally, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. For any home project you can think of, really, check out a gallery of their work online at owenbuildersllc.com. All right, just a reminder, 1 week left before Christmas. So the book, 200 Level, is still available locally at Game Day Spirit and Jane Addams Bookstore. And if you aren't local, Amazon will get it to you in time for Christmas. You got a couple days left to probably do that. Great stocking stuffer for the Illini fan in your life. And I will talk to you guys before the year is out, but it's been a really awesome year. My favorite year so far on this podcast. The book, of course, was a lot of fun to write and get out there, and I appreciate all the feedback about it. But when you look back to the basketball season that we had and the run in March and this football season that we just had, it's been a really awesome 12-month stretch on this podcast. And you all, and just for tuning in as regularly as you do, it means a lot that you would include me as part of your Illini sports diet. So all I've ever wanted, well, not all I've ever wanted, but I think from a young age, I wanted to somehow be associated with Illini sports media coverage. And I didn't know what a podcast was back when I was a kid, and who did? But it just so happens that this format gives me the opportunity to speak on it, and the fact that you are willing or even wanting to listen to it just means a lot to me. So I do appreciate that. All right, everybody. I will talk to you before Christmas if Illinois does well in the bragging rights game, or if they lose and really piss me off, I'd have to do something then too. Ugh. So that would mean a podcast on the 23rd. But here's the thing. There's not going to be a lot of podcasts over the next couple weeks. And frankly, I don't know how many podcasts you would listen to anyway, because it's Christmas time. So whether you do or do not listen to another podcast, if you don't hear from me before then, a very Merry Christmas to you and yours, and a Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year if you don't even hear me before then, though I anticipate that you will. And thanks again for all your support and for you listening and reading and all the other things you do at the 200 level. All right, everybody. We will talk soon. Take care and happy holidays. It is the 200 level. All right. Thanks, YouTube. Appreciate you coming in, and have a good rest of your day, everybody.